So this video is going to be a follow-up to my previous video where I discussed what is Foxhole and looked at Foxhole from the perspective of a war game, basically. Now, in this video, I'm going to identify and try to address three of the fundamental problems that I've identified in Foxhole. And I'm approaching this from the player's point of view. This isn't like a critique of game design. I'm not a game developer or designer or anything like that. I'm just trying to start a discussion on what I believe to be three core things that as players we need to keep in the back of our mind. And if we do discuss and keep these in the back of our mind, hopefully we'd be able to figure out different ways to play the game and play the game more effectively, more efficiently. And hopefully if we are able to address these problems, maybe we'd be able to get more positive results on the battlefield, basically. So, first problem, the player experience. So, funnily enough, I have played another game where this specific problem was apparent in that other game. It was called PlanetSide 2. And from what I've heard, it's still actually going. It still has a somewhat active player base, which is pretty impressive because of the problems it had in development in the early years. I played this game a long time ago. I stopped playing a long time ago, but PlanetSide 2 and Foxhole have the same problem, which is player experience. Now, what is this problem? Let's take a look at like normal games, right? So games like traditional games like basketball, football, chess. If we're talking computer games, then games like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, Dota, World of Warcraft, League of Legends. One thing that's common in all these is that when you take part in games like that, you sort of know what it is that you're getting into, right? For example, in a game of like Counter-Strike, a match of Counter-Strike, you pretty much know you have a rough idea of how long a match is supposed to last. Granted, the match could end quite quickly with a complete wipe, and it could end up in a draw situation, but it's not on the scale of Foxhole where it's somewhere between 2 days and 42 days, and it's not on the scale of PlanetSide 2 where it could also last weeks, basically a war on a continent as it was before in the old days when I was playing. So in Foxhole and in PlanetSide 2, when you log into the game, you don't really know what it is that you're gonna experience. Basically, you don't know what you're gonna get into. For example, for me, every time I log in, I don't know whether if I'm playing in a regiment, I might be doing logistics for like 3 hours and doing nothing but ship equipment or build and gather resources. The next day I could log on and I might be in a massive tank battle that lasts like 2 hours on the front line. In other cases, we might just be in a situation where we log in, we spawn in on the front line, and then the whole front collapses in 15 minutes, and we call it a day there. This is the problem with Foxhole, and it was a problem in PlanetSide 2 as well. You didn't know what it was that you're going to get into every night you logged in on the game, and this frustrates a lot of people, and it's a type of game that isn't really made for everybody. It takes a certain type of player to enjoy such a game where you don't know what it is you're going to get into. And this is one of the problems with Foxhole, is that you don't know what you're going to get into every time you log into the game. Now, the second fundamental problem that I've identified is morale. And this is actually getting quite a lot of discussion these days, particularly about burnout, where people get fed up of the game and they either quit the war or they quit the game entirely, right? This has become more common these days, especially after the 1.0 update. There are a lot of other factors that lead to burnout and demoralization. I'm not going to discuss them all, but I'm going to discuss some. And the first one here, successive defeats. This is something that I don't think a lot of people actually really address or think about. Now, let's get one thing straight. Nobody's ever guaranteed to win, right? Nobody's ever guaranteed to win in life, in games, especially in Foxhole. It just does not happen. but what you can guarantee is that you try to win. All right. Now, one big problem that I've seen, and I've seen this in all the regiments that I played across all three servers, is that you have always have poor objectives. One, people never ask themselves, is this something that we can achieve? And two, if achieving this today, will it have any real effect on the outcome of our front or the war in general, or just this one small battle that we're going to take part of? I mean, how long a lasting effect is this going to have? And yeah, I think those are two main points really. That pretty much sums it up. I've seen it happen many times, and it doesn't just occur with new players and small new regiments that are coming up. It's also happened with larger veteran regiments that have been playing the game for years. They go out and set an objective, and many times it's something that so large that you really don't have the capability of achieving it. You don't. It's not that realistic, or the odds are pretty low. And we just constantly repeat this over and over again. And if you keep on doing this, it's not something that the ordinary player is gonna find fun, really. um, One way that I've found able to address this is that you start picking up smaller objectives. Really, try to identify things that you have the capability of achieving, and try to figure out in which ways can this have a positive effect for the team in the war in general in the long run. It is something that is possible to do. I have proven this with my regiment over the last week or so. You won't be able to achieve the very large grand schemes of like winning the whole war or winning a whole front by yourself. I haven't been able to do that because I haven't actually attempted that, and I'm not in the situation to actually even try to attempt such a feat. But it is something that people should think about the next time you're going out on an operation. Are we getting in over our heads here? And we need to make sure that we don't keep on making this mistake over and over again, because slowly people are just going to get fed up with the monotonous gameplay. One core aspect of bad game design that people usually identify is that does the player's decision actually mean anything? If your decision doesn't have any meaning and it doesn't affect the outcome, then people just stop playing such games. That's a very common thing in game design that I know of, because I've played a lot of games and I've played a lot of bad games. That's one of the core problems. And this is very prominent in Foxhole here if you're trying to organize a regiment or trying to take part in an operation. You people like to feel that they've made some progress somehow. So I've just realized that I miscounted how many slides I had. It's actually one extra slide. So I think at the beginning of the video I said I was gonna discuss 3. It's actually 4 problems. So yeah, there's one more after this. Sorry. But yeah, time and manpower. This one I'm pretty sure a lot of people are actually beginning to realize is a very big drain in the game. And they are interconnected, which is why I've put them both together here. The time spent in putting effort into the game and how much manpower you have available to yourself. If you put more men to a single task, it will require less time usually, right? We're talking here for logistics and facilities, and in some cases, it actually does help out in combat situations as well. But digressing a little bit here, if if you have more men, you're able to get things done quicker, like gathering resources, manufacturing, shipping things off to the front line. Um, and this relates to the previous problems of the player experience and morale. If you're constantly sinking in a lot of time and not getting positive results, this has that catastrophic effect that we talked about, where it demoralizes people basically. Now, one thing that I've seen is that people have the veteran players that played before 1.0 and are playing now, they're still trying to play the game as it was before 1.0. Now, I've never played Foxhole before 1.0. I only got the game as it got released at 1.0. So I can only talk from my perspective as I'm looking at it now. And the one thing that I see with the Logi and facility players is that they're still trying to cling on to the past. All right. Um, we've got to let go. We don't players now don't have the capability of doing everything in the logistical and the facility side of the game anymore. That's all gone. Sorry to say, right? One of the big cases of where the burnout happens is that everyone is still trying to do everything by themselves. They're trying to gather the resources, manufacture the weapons, ship the equipment off to the front lines, and in some cases, uh, after they've done all this, they want to have some fun, right? So they then go off to the front line and then use this equipment in combat. If we take a step back and take a look at that, we realize that this is crazy. I mean, who wants to play a game like that, man? it, specialization, so far as I've seen, is looked down upon in the Foxhole community for the most part. Everyone doesn't seem to buy in that specialization is a good thing. For me personally, looking at the scale of this game, specialization is the only way forward now. Because if you're constantly trying to do everything, you're not going to be able to be good at anything. You're going to be mediocre. You know, jack of all trades, master of none. And because of the due to the nature of the morale and the burnout and the scale of the game, if we keep on trying to cling on to this sort of like strategy, it's just gonna eventually just kill the game. Basically, we're gonna kill the game for ourselves, really. Um, that's the point I'm trying to get at here is that trying to economize ourselves. It's it's something that needs to be done. All right. What I one point of view that I have that not a lot of people share is that I do believe that there is actually a player-driven economy now with the update of 1.0. It's not an economy that involves markets and items and commodities and whatnot, but it very much does exist at this point in time for Foxhole with the introduction of facilities into the game. Uh, People are beginning to realize that we could essentially have a trade and market system that isn't a formal system, but something that will streamline all of the tedious parts of the game. And by doing this, we'd be able to cut down on a lot of the time and manpower that is currently at this point in time draining a lot of the players.